Good morning. It is Tuesday, February the 26th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo instead of where I stand on the issues. And you and I have been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed into believing that nothing can be known with certainty, that reality is a matter of opinion, that we have no free will, that nothing exists except that which we can touch and feel, that there are no universal rights and wrongs, that absolutely everything is a matter of opinion, and that therefore anything in the universe can be manipulated, such as the weather, the climate, etc. And so that's getting right to the essence of what I'm trying to communicate here, is that it's culture that's going to inform our politics and shape our politics, not the other way around. If you listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, you would think so. As a matter of fact, they come out and say so, that politics is the issue, and that our culture would be much better if we would simply put the right people into office. Baloney. We're never going to put the right people into office if we don't have the culture to support them in the first place. The left has been working on shaping our culture for decades. And what you see going on politically now is the result of those efforts. And they use all kinds of different types of communication techniques. They use the news media. They use television shows. They use movies. They use bumper stickers. I don't know how many of you have seen the bumper sticker that says, "Question everything." That's a left-wing diktat. There's other little slogans. They love to sloganeer, and there's little slogans. Never give up is a left-wing slogan. You wouldn't think so, but that's the whole idea. They want to slip it into your psyche. They don't announce it as being left-wing. They don't say, Che Guevara says, never give up. They just say, never give up. And that sounds like a great idea. But what it's really all about is creating revolutionaries. And that's the point there. It's not so much advice to you as an individual that you're going to go out and try to get a career as, I don't know, professional ice skater, so never give up. It's really more about you're going to revolutionize the world, don't give up on the revolution. So it's those little things that they want to get into your psyche, because if you will think left, you will act left, and eventually you're going to vote left. Today's offering from Op Hawkeye on Instagram, the memorial is for Chief Warrant Officer 3 Thomas Joseph Gibbons, who was born December 23rd, 1971, and was killed January 30th, 2003 in Afghanistan. And we say, rest easy, warrior. Thank you for your service. And when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Ayn Rand lexicon. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And actually, instead of doing the Ayn Rand lexicon right now, I'm going to go ahead and play a little clip from Liz Wheeler and make a comment or two afterwards.
Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. It's Columbus Day today. Happy Columbus Day. The day the radical left loves to trash Christopher Columbus, who discovered North America, as a brutal white man who committed mass genocide. And that narrative from the left is revisionist history, and it's a lie. Let's play a game of fact versus fiction, shall we? The left claims Christopher Columbus committed mass genocide. Is that fact or is that fiction? It is fiction. Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas in 1492. At that time, there were approximately 20 million indigenous people living here. Within 200 years, approximately 95% of those 20 million were dead. That part is historically accurate. But what killed them? How did Christopher Columbus and his men carry out such mass extermination? Well, they didn't. Nearly all of the 19 million natives who died after the arrival of the European settlers were killed by disease. Smallpox, the flu, TB, malaria, the plague, measles, cholera, etc. These diseases came with the European settlers, and the natives had no immunities to them. The diseases, and not Columbus, wiped out the native populations. The second claim from the left, Christopher Columbus was a brutal tyrant. Fact or fiction? This is fiction too. A professor at Stanford University named Carol Delaney says most of the death came after Columbus's time in the Americas. Delaney says, and I quote, "They're blaming Columbus for the things he didn't do. It was mostly the people who came after, the settlers. I think he's been terribly maligned." In fact, Columbus prohibited his men from raping and plundering the natives, and when 2 of his men did it anyway, he executed them. In his writings after his journeys, Columbus defended the natives, and he adopted the son of a chief. That brings us to our third claim from the left. The colonialist white settlers stole America from the natives. This is neither fact nor fiction. It's a matter of context. The history of the world is a history of war and conquest. That's what all peoples did. That's what the natives did to each other. That's what Columbus did to the natives. He conquered the Americas. That being said, the left suggests Columbus was worse than everybody else of that time, and that is fiction. The left claims they have proof that Columbus was evil because of a letter detailing the evil actions of Columbus. The problem is that document was written by Columbus's chief political rival who hated him. It'd be like asking Hillary Clinton to write the historical account of the 2016 election against Donald Trump. That letter was nothing more than revisionist history from the 15th century recycled by modern leftists 5 centuries later. The next claim from the left, Christopher Columbus owned slaves. This is true. This is fact. Columbus took natives as slaves. There's no excuse for that. It's unequivocally wrong to enslave another human being, period. But the left ignores the historical context again. The Native Americans were also famous for enslaving each other. And the Pope at the time declared cannibals to be slaves. Still doesn't make slavery right. But the left purposely leaves out historical context to push their radical leftist narrative that Columbus was evil and therefore white men in 2018 should pay the price. The left peddles this revisionist history as an excuse to justify big government policies that take from the haves and give to the have-nots. And they use race to tell you it's the fair thing to do. But it's not fair, and the narrative is a lie. And that is my final point. You can reach me on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. If you liked the show, please send me an email at oann.com/contact. In the meantime, catch us here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. And until then, have a good night.
Okay, so when I looked at this, I got this on YouTube, and the title of it was "The Truth About Christopher Columbus." I thought, goody, because everything else Liz Wheeler does is basically a reaction to the left. Everything is a reaction. It's this lefty said that lefty said such and such, the left-wing media did this, that, and the other thing, or this is what the left-wing media won't tell you about. It's all reactionary. She's not doing anything to, or hasn't been doing anything, or very little, to spread values, to come up and make should statements, for instance. This is what should happen, this is what we should be doing, etc. But instead, reacting to the left. This is what the left, you would by listening to Liz and to Rush and to Sean, you would think that the left runs this country. You wouldn't think, if you came here from another planet, you wouldn't think that the Republicans had the White House and the Senate. You would assume that the liberals ran the whole country, lock, stock, and barrel, that they had every governorship, that they had every state house, when exactly the opposite is true. But again, listening to the so-called conservatives, you would think that the left is a much bigger force in this country than they really are. They're not that big. Anyway, so she says the truth about Christopher Columbus, and I'm thinking, goody, she's going to actually come out and give us some values and say, this is who Christopher Columbus was, this is what he was trying to do and accomplish, and provide some historical context, etc. And instead, she goes again and takes this as an opportunity to react to the left with a fact versus fiction approach to this, when what she should have done was go ahead and just simply tell us what it is about Christopher Columbus that was good, that was right, and go from there and leave the left out of it. Who cares what the left says? All of their allegations, their claims are arbitrary. They have no evidence or proof. They just make a bold statement. Christopher Columbus was a racist. Christopher Columbus was massacred people. Well, what evidence do you have for that? No answer. So you ignore it and move on. But anyways, the only thing in here that I liked about what she was doing and what she was saying was she made one absolutely definitive statement. She displayed certainty of knowledge. Good for her, because there's not enough people around, not even Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, that are willing to express certainty of knowledge. They're always wanting to qualify their statements by saying, in my opinion. And she did not do that. She came out and said, slavery is absolutely wrong. She didn't say that slavery is unpopular, because that's the left's position. The left's position on slavery is that it might happen again any day. That the only reason we don't have slavery today is because it's unpopular. But that it might become popular again, so we've always got to be on guard against slavery. But Liz Wheeler was right. She said slavery is wrong. Nobody has the right to enslave another human being. Absolutely definitive and with certainty of knowledge. Okay, this is the reason why we don't have to worry about slavery coming back. We learned something. We used to enslave people, whether it was we're talking about white North Americans or other people in Europe or other places. We used to do that because we thought it was right. Aristotle made the case for slavery and said that there's certain people that are just naturally born slaves. Baloney. It was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. But he honestly believed it. He thought that was correct and right. And it turned out he was wrong. We learned that that was the case. We learned that slavery is wrong. We learned that Jim Crow is wrong. And that's why they're not coming back. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. So when I come back, now I'm going to go ahead and read from Ayn Rand's lexicon. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Let me find this darn thing here. Come on. Not cooperating here at all. There it is. Okay. The Ayn Rand lexicon, and the concept of the day is foreign policy. We do need a policy based on long-range principles, i.e. an ideology, but a revision of our foreign policy from its basic premises on up is what today's anti-ideologists dare not contemplate. The worse its results, the louder our public leaders proclaim that our foreign policy is bipartisan. A proper solution would be to elect statesmen, if such appeared, with a radically different foreign policy, a policy explicitly and proudly dedicated to the defense of America's rights and national self-interests, repudiating foreign aid and all forms of international self-immolation. And by the way, we have somebody that's close to that description in President Trump today. The essence of capitalism's foreign policy is free trade, i.e. the abolition of trade barriers, of protective tariffs, of special privileges, the opening of the world's trade routes to free international exchange, and competition among the private citizens of all countries, dealing directly with one another. During the 19th century, it was free trade that liberated the world, undercutting and wrecking the remnants of feudalism and the statist tyranny of absolute monarchies. And that's the only place where she really goes wrong here, is that there is no such thing as free trade. It just doesn't exist. The best that we can hope for is to have trade treaties and negotiations that are in our best interests. Back to the book. Playboy, what about force in foreign policy? You have said that any nation had the right to invade Nazi Germany during World War II. Rand, certainly. Playboy, and that any free nation today has the moral right, though not the duty, to invade Soviet Russia, Cuba, or any other slave pen. Correct? Rand, correct. A dictatorship, a country that violates the laws of its own citizens, is an outlaw and can claim no rights. Playboy, would you actively advocate that the United States invade Cuba or the Soviet Union? Rand, not at present. I don't think it's necessary. I would advocate that which the Soviet Union fears above all else, economic boycott. I would advocate a blockade of Cuba and an economic boycott of Soviet Russia, and you would see both of those regimes collapse without the loss of a single American life. Playboy, would you favor U.S. withdrawal from the United Nations? Rand, yes. I do not sanction the grotesque pretense of an organization allegedly devoted to world peace and human rights, which includes Soviet Russia, the worst aggressor and bloodiest butcher in history, as one of its members. The notion of protecting rights, with Soviet Russia among the protectors, is an insult to the concept of rights and to the intelligence of any man who is asked to endorse or sanction such an organization. I do not believe that an individual should cooperate with criminals, and for all the same reasons. I do not believe that free countries should cooperate with dictatorships. Playboy, would you advocate severing diplomatic relations with Russia? Rand, yes. Playboy's interview with Ayn Rand, pamphlet 11. Russia, like Nazi Germany, like any bully, feeds an appeasement and will retreat placatingly at the first sound of firm opposition. When certain statist groups counting apparently on a total collapse of an American self-esteem dare go so far as to urge America's surrender into slavery without a fight under the slogan "better red than dead," the conservatives rush to proclaim they'd prefer to be dead, thus helping to spread the idea that our only alternative is communism or destruction, forgetting the only proper answer to an ultimatum of that kind is better see the Reds dead. Excellent point. Okay, back in a minute. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And I'm going to be reading from the Rules for Radicals Defeated. And so this is called the 13 Tactics Explained. Rule 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. So I'm going to skip down here to where he's using some examples. Here we go. Now, let us look at some examples of the way the first rule has been used. Obama's symbolic announcement to run for president. In 2007, then-Senator Barack Obama used Alinsky's first rule in his official announcement that he would seek the office of President of the United States. As a little-known senator with an undistinguished record, Obama had no real record or power to display. Therefore, instead, he used Alinsky's first rule and managed the people's perception in order to appear powerful. Taking Alinsky's analogy of the ears, Obama sought to make enough noise that his fledgling campaign would appear larger and more powerful than it was. Here's how he did it. First, he used symbolism. He stood before the old state capitol building in February of 2007 and declared himself a candidate for President of the United States. An online newspaper described it in these words, quote, "The first-term senator announced his candidacy from the state capitol where he began his elective career just 10 years ago, and in front of the building where in another century Lincoln served 8 years in the Illinois legislature," unquote. With a few thousand followers listening, the young senator seized upon everything he could to make his movement seem bigger than it was. He mentioned Lincoln several times in his speech. This was effective because Lincoln is commonly thought to be the greatest American president in American history. However, the power of the symbolism went well beyond that. As an African American, standing in the very place where the man who had signed the Emancipation Proclamation into law began his career, Obama seemed to speak to the enormous possibilities that exist only because of the boldness of belief and the American spirit. His shrewd use of the 16th president made Obama look like the inevitable culmination of all that Lincoln sought to accomplish. Never mind that Obama did not possess the slightest qualifications to be president. He appeared to, and power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. He also spoke about the war in Iraq and bringing home our troops in an effort to magnify his message. This speech took place in the first few weeks of the surge and in the midst of rising discontent over the war and over Bush's management of Iraq. He seized upon the issue that was garnering the highest percentage of mainstream media coverage and married himself to it. Since Mr. Obama was not in the U.S. Senate when the resolution to give war powers to President Bush took place, he found himself in the unique position of speaking out against the war in Iraq without seeming hypocritical for having voted for the resolution. He would later exploit this as a club to hammer Hillary Clinton, his more experienced opponent, who had been in the Senate at the time and voted for the resolution. The fake presidential seal. How many remember the fake presidential seal from Obama's meeting in Chicago in June of 2008? It caused quite a stir as people felt that Obama was using a seal that looked far too much like the official presidential seal. This is another example of perceived power. Candidates have always sought to look presidential, but many believe this crossed a line. In fact, some have opined that the seal used in this manner was in fact a violation of the law. The Weekly Standard explains that it is illegal to use the presidential seal when you are not, in fact, the President of the United States. If Obama's team did cross the line, they did so because they were following Alinsky's rules, which do not consider anything, no matter how immoral, to be dirty tricks. Instead, moves like this are demonstrations of how committed someone is to their cause. The ends justify the means methodology of Alinsky can often lead to questionable acts like this. The office of the president-elect. In an unprecedented move, Obama chose to set up what he called the office of the president-elect. Of course, there is in fact no such thing as an office of the president-elect, and it was merely an affectation to bestow perceived power on him before he actually had any real power. Few would argue that it was effective, and that no president-elect has ever had more effect on policy while not actually holding office. Obama versus Hillary in the caucus states. Another example of Obama's use of the first rule is his method for attaining caucus victories. The Obama supporters were routinely louder and more aggressive than the delegates for the opposition were. It didn't matter if he had more delegates at the beginning of the process. As long as he had the loudest delegates, they would eventually drown out the others and claim the victory. And this is exactly what they did. According to TalkLeft.com, they obtained a memo that illustrated the main tactics the Obama people used to overwhelm the opposition at caucuses. Here are the main points they brought out. Quote, individuals arriving all at once in large groups can disrupt the caucus by making it difficult to keep track of sign-in sheets, among other things. Individuals may arrive who are not registered to vote in a particular precinct with the story that they just moved there. Unquote. Supporters for a particular candidate, such as Senator Clinton, have arrived at caucus sites early to decorate and organize and have been told that the building was locked. Unquote. These are clear examples of power being not only what you have, but also what others perceive that you have. Obama used groups of loud, rowdy delegates and possibly non-delegates to make it seem as though his support was larger than it really was. Strong organization and avid supporters are often what lead to a caucus victory, but Obama's supporters were beyond the pale. Moreover, by stooping to dirty political tricks like locking the building, it not only kept the opposition out, it made Obama's people appear more powerful than Clinton's. Since Clinton won in the bigger states such as Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida, although Florida did not count at the time, it was critical for Obama to take the caucuses, and take them he did. Most believe that the caucuses swung the primary in favor of Obama, and without these tactics, Hillary Clinton would have been the Democratic nominee. Summary. In describing what he means by tactics, Alinsky says, in the world of give and take, tactics is the art of how to take and how to give. Here, our concern is with the tactics of taking, how the have-nots can take a power away from the haves. The Alinsky model is designed to provide power to those who don't already possess it. It is the Marxist idea of the proletariat rising up and casting off the oppressive bourgeoisie. Since Alinsky's emphasis is on helping the lower class, he realizes that some special tactics will have to be employed. After all, the lower classes possess neither the prestige nor the money to effect any real change. They must rely on other methods. The first of these methods is to manage the art of perception and to use sheer numbers where possible to offset the entrenched power and wealth of the upper class. If the lower class sees itself as powerless to create change, they will not be mobilized to overthrow the rich. So Alinsky redefines power to be not only what you have, but also what others think you have. The art of the bluff and the ability to manage perceptions to favor those whom Alinsky saw as disenfranchised from the American dream form the first general principle for the successful agitator. And one of the words that jumped out at me is about the art of the bluff. And it reminds me that the left is always bluffing. The left wants to convince you that it has knowledge about things that they don't actually have. And they do it in order to shut you up, to intimidate you, and to bully you into silence. So call their bluff whenever possible. And let me see what else. Form the disenfranchised. Well, again, just it's the whole idea is that they're bluffing. Here's an example of it: is the Nancy Pelosi the other day. She was saying, well, Donald Trump ought to be careful and the Republicans ought to be careful, because if they're going to use these tactics, the emergency declaration, saying there's an emergency on the border and using that as an excuse to get funds to build the wall, then when a Democrat becomes president, we're going to use the emergency powers to get handgun control or gun control, for instance. Okay? No, they're not going to do any such thing. But she wants to say that in order to bully and intimidate the conservatives into dropping this thing. They want to scare them. It works pretty well with the Senate, and in the House. Donald Trump, fortunately, doesn't go for it because he knows exactly what she's doing. He knows she's bluffing. That for all anybody knows, no Democrat will ever get elected to the presidency again. Right? There's no way to predict that. But anyways, an excellent answer to her would have been simply to say, that's fine. And then when our Republican gets elected after your Democrat, he will simply do a Donald Trump and tear apart everything your Democratic president enacted. So, on that note, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.